My rent was due in 4 days. I had exactly $312 in my bank account, and a pile of medical bills from my grandmother's final hospital stay that could choke a horse. The translation work had dried up this month, which meant I was back to relying on the one thing that kept me sane and occasionally solvent, singing at Cafe Napoli in Boston's North End. I loved that place. Loved the smell of espresso and garlic, the way the brick walls held decades of conversations, the warmth that seeped into your bones the second you walked through the door. Tuesday nights were mine. I'd stand on the tiny stage in the corner, barely elevated, and sing the old songs my grandmother taught me, Neapolitan songs, the kind that made old Italian men cry into their wine and young couples lean closer together. Tonight felt different the moment I stepped onto that worn wooden platform. The usual crowd was there, familiar faces scattered among the small tables, but there was a tension in the air I couldn't name. Maybe it was just my own anxiety talking. The bills, the loneliness, the way my apartment felt emptier every day without Nona's voice filling it. I closed my eyes and let the first notes of Anima e Cor rise from somewhere deep in my chest. My grandmother's favorite. She'd sung it to me in Neapolitan, not the standard Italian version everyone knew, but the old dialect from her village outside Naples. The words felt like home in my mouth, like reaching back through time to hold her hand one more time. The cafe went quiet. That always happened when I sang this one. But tonight the silence felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't identify. I opened my eyes halfway through the second verse and saw him. He stood near the entrance, frozen. A man in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. Dark hair, darker eyes, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens. 2 men flanked him, clearly security, their postures screaming professional protection. But it was his expression that made my voice almost falter. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Those dark brown eyes were locked on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Not threatening exactly, but focused in a way that suggested he was memorizing every note, every breath, every movement. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. One of the men beside him leaned in to say something, but he waved him off without breaking eye contact with me. I finished the song. The applause was warm, genuine, but I barely heard it. The man was already moving through the cafe toward the stage, people instinctively clearing a path for him. Up close, he was even more striking. Strong jawline, olive skin, eyes that held depths I couldn't begin to measure. He wore power like a second skin, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice was low, rough around the edges, like he'd been silent for too long and the words hurt coming out. I blinked, thrown by the directness. "My grandmother taught me. The version you sang. That specific dialect." He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, richer. "Where is she from?" "A village outside Naples, Caserta province." I searched his face for clues to this interrogation. "Why does it matter?" "Because the only person I've ever heard sing it that way was my mother." His voice cracked on the last word. "And she's been dead for 19 years. The air between us felt electric, charged with a grief I recognized because I was drowning in my own. Around us, the cafe had resumed its normal rhythm, conversations flowing, dishes clattering, but we existed in a bubble separate from all of it. "My grandmother passed away 2 years ago," I said quietly. "She was the last of my family." Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "My mother died when I was 15. Cancer. Fast and brutal." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "My name is Christopher Vitale. Emily Carter." "Emily." He said my name like he was testing how it felt, how it tasted. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." Every instinct I had screamed warning. Men who looked like him, who carried themselves with that kind of authority, who had security details, didn't just happen into small cafes. They brought complications, danger, the kind of trouble I couldn't afford. But those eyes, God, those eyes held the same hollow ache I saw in my own mirror every morning. "I'm listening," I said. "I have documents, letters my mother wrote before she died, family correspondence, some going back decades. They're in Italian, old Italian, some in dialect. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and held it out. I need them translated, properly, by someone who understands the nuances, the cultural context. I took the card. Heavy stock, simple design, just a name and a phone number. No company, no title. There are professional translation services. I don't want professional services. The intensity was back in his voice. I want someone who treats the words with respect. Someone who understands what it means to hold on to the last pieces of someone you loved. The card felt heavy in my hand. Everything logical told me to politely decline, to keep my life simple and uncomplicated. But logic didn't pay rent. Logic didn't fill the empty spaces grief carved out. How much are we talking? I asked. Document volume and payment. Several boxes of correspondence and personal papers. I'll pay you $200 an hour, with a minimum of 20 hours guaranteed. I nearly dropped the card. $4,000 minimum. That would cover rent for 2 months and make a significant dent in the medical bills. It was too much money, which meant there was a catch. Why so generous? Because it's worth it to me. His expression didn't change, didn't reveal anything beyond that simple statement. And because I think you're the right person for this. Will you consider it? I should have said no. Should have handed back the card and walked away from whatever complication he represented. Instead, I heard myself say, "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow, if possible. My office is in the financial district. I can send a car for you. I'll take the T." The subway was public, traceable, safe. A private car felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready for. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. Is 10 in the morning acceptable? Yes. He produced his phone. Typed something quickly. I just sent you the address. Come to the main entrance. Tell security you're expected. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. Didn't want to break whatever strange spell this conversation existed under. I'll be there, I said. Christopher held my gaze for another long moment, and I felt that connection again. That recognition of shared grief and loneliness. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked out of the cafe with his security detail trailing behind. I stood there on my little stage, holding a business card that weighed more than paper should, and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Cafe Napoli resumed its normal chaos around me, but everything felt different now. Changed. Like a door had opened somewhere in my life, and I couldn't see yet whether it led to salvation or disaster. $4,000 minimum. My grandmother's dialect spoken by a stranger's dead mother. Dark eyes that saw too much and promised nothing. I tucked the card into my pocket and tried to ignore the feeling that I'd just stepped off a cliff without checking if there was ground below. Christopher's office wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something cold and corporate, all glass and steel, but instead I found myself in a converted brownstone that managed to feel both historic and modern. Wood paneling, leather furniture, bookshelves filled with actual books instead of decorative nonsense. The receptionist led me to a second-floor room that had clearly been designed as a library. 3 archival boxes sat on a mahogany table. Christopher stood by the window, looking out at the street below. He turned when I entered, and that intensity from last night was still there, maybe even stronger in the daylight. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Coffee? Water?" Coffee would be great. He made it himself from a setup in the corner. Proper espresso from a machine that probably cost more than my car. When he handed me the cup, our fingers brushed, and I felt that same electric awareness from the cafe. "These are my mother's letters," he said, gesturing to the boxes. Correspondence with family back in Italy, personal journals, notes she made about recipes and family history. Some are typed, most are handwritten. Her penmanship was better than most people's typing. I set down my cup and opened the first box. The smell hit me immediately. Old paper, faded ink, the particular mustiness of documents preserved with care, letters tied with ribbon, journals with leather covers worn soft by handling, photographs tucked between pages. "She was beautiful," I said, looking at a photo of a dark-haired woman with Christopher's eyes, laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. "She was everything." His voice went rough again. "Take your time with them. There's no rush, but there was. I could feel it in the way he looked at those boxes, like they held answers to questions he'd been asking for 14 years. I pulled out the first letter, dated from 30 years ago, and began to read. Maria Vitale's handwriting was elegant, flowing, full of personality. She wrote to her sister about life in America, about her young son, about the man she'd married. The affection in every word made my chest tight. "Your mother loved words," I said. "The way she describes things, it's almost poetic." Christopher moved closer, reading over my shoulder. "Read it to me? In English, but read it the way she would have said it." So I did. I translated aloud, trying to capture not just the words but the warmth, the humor, the fierce love that radiated from every sentence. Christopher stood perfectly still, barely breathing, and when I finished, he turned away quickly, but not before I saw the shine in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his back still to me. "That's exactly what I needed." We fell into a rhythm. I'd read through letters, taking notes, occasionally translating passages aloud when something particularly moving or significant appeared. Christopher would sit nearby, sometimes at the table, sometimes in one of the leather chairs, just listening. The silence between us felt comfortable, like we'd known each other longer than 18 hours. Around noon, he ordered lunch from somewhere local. Real food, not corporate catering nonsense. We ate and talked, conversation drifting from translation work to music to the slow process of grief that never really ends, just changes shape. "My grandmother raised me," I told him. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She gave up everything to take me in. Never complained once about the life she lost. I owed her everything. Medical bills," he said. It wasn't a question. "Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, like your mother. By the time they found it, treatment was just buying time." I pushed pasta around my plate. "I'd sell everything I owned to hear her voice one more time. I used to have recordings of my mother singing," Christopher said quietly. "My father destroyed them all after she died. Said keeping them made it harder to move forward. That's cruel. He was a complicated man. Dead now, too. Heart attack when I was 17. I'm sorry. Don't be. We weren't close." He set down his fork, his expression closing off. "Tell me about your grandmother's village, the one in Caserta." We talked for another hour about southern Italy, about the old ways that were disappearing, about language and culture, and the weight of carrying traditions forward when you're the last one left. Christopher knew more about Italian regional history than I expected, spoke about it with a passion that made me curious about his connection to it all. When I returned to the letters that afternoon, I found the one that changed everything. It was tucked near the bottom of the second box, older than most of the others, the paper more fragile. Maria's handwriting looked younger here, less assured. I read through it once silently, my Italian decent enough to catch the general meaning, then read it again more carefully. My hands started shaking. "Christopher," I said, my voice strange in my own ears, "I need you to read this with me." He was beside me in seconds. "What is it?" "Your mother wrote this to someone named Julia. A cousin, I think. It's dated about 40 years ago, before you were born." I pointed to a passage near the middle. "She's talking about a marriage proposal. Someone from Calabria, representing a powerful family there. She refused." "Calabria," his jaw tightened. "The 'Ndrangheta." The word hung between us, heavy with implications I was only beginning to understand. I'd heard of the 'Ndrangheta, of course. Calabrian organized crime, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Europe. But hearing Christopher say it like that, with that particular edge to his voice, made connections form in my mind that I didn't want to acknowledge. "She says the family was angry about the refusal," I continued translating, forcing myself to focus on the words, "that they viewed it as an insult. She writes that she's afraid they won't forget, that they might come after her husband's family, after their business interests." Christopher took the letter from my hands, reading it himself. His Italian was clearly fluent, his eyes moving quickly over the text. When he looked up, his expression was harder than I'd seen it, all the softness from earlier conversation gone. "She mentions a traitor," he said. Someone close to the family who might be sympathetic to the Calabrians. Someone with blood ties. I found the passage he meant. Il traditore di sangue. The traitor of blood. Did she name them? I scanned the rest of the letter carefully. No. Or if she did, that page is missing. Look, the next letter is dated 3 months later. Whatever she wrote in between is gone. Christopher stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched. I watched him process this information, saw the way his whole demeanor shifted into something more dangerous, more controlled. This matters, I said carefully. This isn't just family history. No. He turned back to me. Emily, I need to be honest with you about something. The work I do, the business I'm involved in, it's not entirely conventional. I gathered that from the security detail and the vague business card. A flicker of something, maybe amusement, crossed his face. You're observant. I'm not stupid. You want to tell me what's really going on? Not yet. He came back to the table, his focus entirely on me. But I need you to keep translating. All of it. Every letter, every journal entry, every scrap of paper in these boxes. Can you do that? You think there's more about this traitor, about the 'Ndrangheta? I know there is. My mother was careful, deliberate. If she wrote about this once, she documented more. She always said the truth had to be preserved, even when it was dangerous. I should have walked away. Should have recognized the warning signs, the danger implicit in every word he wasn't saying. But I looked at those letters, at Maria's elegant handwriting, at the careful way she'd preserved her truth, and I thought about my grandmother, about the stories she'd made sure I knew, about the importance of remembering. I'll do it, I said, but I want the truth eventually. All of it. You'll have it. Christopher held my gaze. I promise you that. He pulled out his phone, made a call in rapid Italian that I only partially followed. Something about security, about investigations, about being discreet. When he hung up, his expression had shifted again, back to something gentler. I'm having someone watch your apartment, he said. Just a precaution. You think I'm in danger from a 40-year-old letter? I think information is power, and you now have information that certain people would rather stayed buried. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card different from the first. This one had more details. This number reaches me directly, day or night. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. I took the card, this time fully aware I was stepping deeper into whatever complicated world Christopher inhabited. Okay. I mean it, Emily. Don't hesitate. I won't. We spent another 2 hours going through letters, but the easy companionship from earlier had shifted into something more charged, more aware. Every accidental touch felt significant. Every shared glance held weight. When I finally left that evening, taking the subway home with a substantial check in my bag and more questions than answers, I knew my life had changed. The only question was whether I was walking toward something better or something that would consume me entirely. 3 days passed in a blur of translation work and mounting tension. I spent hours in that library room, surrounded by Maria Vitali's words, while Christopher handled business I didn't ask about. We'd developed an unspoken understanding. I'd work through the letters. He'd appear periodically, sometimes sitting with me, sometimes just standing in the doorway watching. The attraction between us was becoming impossible to ignore. He called me Wednesday evening while I was still at the office, his voice tight with controlled energy. Dinner tomorrow night, my house. We need to talk. Not an invitation, a statement. But his tone held something else. A vulnerability that made me say yes without thinking. I'll text you the address, he continued. 7 o'clock. A car will pick you up. Christopher, I can drive myself. Humor me, please. I'd never heard him say please before. Okay. 7. The car that arrived Thursday evening was exactly what I expected. Black, expensive, driven by someone who looked like they knew how to handle more than steering wheels. We drove west out of the city, into neighborhoods where houses sat back from the road behind gates and walls. Money lived here. Old money and new money that pretended to be old. Christopher's property sat at the end of a private drive, a modern structure of glass and stone that somehow managed to look warm instead of cold. Security was everywhere but discreet. Cameras, sensors, Men in dark clothing positioned strategically. I'd stopped pretending not to notice things like that. He met me at the door wearing dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, collar open. Casual for him, but still radiating that controlled power. His eyes swept over me, taking in the simple green dress I'd chosen, and something heated flickered in his expression. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look worried." A slight smile. Direct as always. "Come in." The interior matched the exterior. Contemporary but warm, filled with art that looked original and expensive. He led me through rooms designed for living, not showing off, until we reached a terrace overlooking the city lights. A table was set for two, intimate and perfect. "I had dinner brought in from a place in the North End," he said. "Real Italian food, not the tourist garbage." We sat, and he poured wine while I tried to process being here, in his home, sharing a meal that felt more like a date than a business dinner. The food was excellent, but I barely tasted it. The tension between us was thick enough to choke on. "You've been avoiding the subject," I said finally. "The business, what you actually do." Christopher set down his fork, his expression shifting into something more guarded. "I run the Vitale organization. We have interests in construction, real estate, importing. Some of it's completely legitimate. Some of it exists in gray areas. And some of it is exactly what you're imagining. Organized crime. That's the ugly phrase for it. I prefer to think of it as managing territories and interests that traditional law enforcement can't or won't address. That's a hell of a rationalization. Maybe." He leaned back, studying me. "My father built this organization from nothing. When he died, I was 17, and vultures circled immediately. I had two choices. Let everything collapse, or step up. I stepped up. And your mother? What would she think about the choices you made?" His jaw tightened. "She'd probably be disappointed. She always wanted me to go to college, become a lawyer or a doctor, something respectable. But she also understood that the world we lived in didn't operate on college degrees and good intentions. The world you chose to stay in. Yes." No apology in his voice. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emily. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who threatened what's mine. Made decisions that kept me awake at night. But I've also protected the city's interests, kept peace between factions that would tear each other apart, provided for families who depend on me. I absorbed this, the confirmation of what I'd suspected since finding that letter. The 'Ndrangheta, they're here in Boston? They're everywhere. And they've been pushing into our territories through an alliance with the Cartel del Golfo out of Mexico. It's a strange partnership. European old guard and Mexican muscle, but it's effective." He poured more wine. "That letter you found, about my mother refusing the marriage proposal, that refusal created a blood insult. In their world, in this world, insults like that don't expire. You think they're coming after you now? I know they are. We've had skirmishes, territory disputes, shipments intercepted. Nothing I couldn't handle before, but the escalation pattern suggests they're building to something bigger." He held my gaze. "That traitor my mother mentioned? I think they got their inside connection eventually. Someone close to me who's been feeding them information." My stomach dropped. "That's why you need the letters translated. You're looking for clues about who it might be." "Yes." My mother was careful, observant. If she suspected someone specific, if she had concerns about anyone in my father's organization, she would have documented it. Those letters are the only record left. My father destroyed everything else. Why would he do that? Because he was paranoid and broken after she died. He convinced himself that her concerns, her warnings, had somehow caused her cancer. Magical thinking born from grief. Christopher's voice went rough. I barely remember those last few years with him. He was physically present but emotionally gone. We sat in silence for a moment, the city lights spreading below us like scattered diamonds. I thought about Maria's elegant handwriting, the care she'd taken to preserve her observations, the love that radiated from every word she'd written about her son. "I'll keep translating," I said. "All of it, until we find what you need. Emily, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. If the 'Ndrangheta or the cartel discover you're helping me, discover you have information they want, they won't hesitate to come after you. You said you'd protect me. I will, with everything I have. But protection isn't the same as safety. I stood, walked to the terrace railing. Boston sprawled before me, beautiful and indifferent to the complications of my life. Behind me, I heard Christopher move, felt him approach until he was standing close enough that I could feel his body heat. Why me? I asked without turning. There are professional translators, people with security clearances and experience with sensitive material. Why offer this to someone you met in a cafe? Because you understood the song. Because when you translated my mother's letters, you treated them like they mattered. Because when you look at me, you see a person, not a threat or an opportunity. His hand touched my shoulder, gentle. And because from the moment I heard you sing, something in me recognized something in you. I turned to face him. We were inches apart, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pulse beat at his throat. This is a terrible idea, I whispered. Probably the worst I've ever had. I should walk away. Go back to my small, safe, boring life. You should. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. But you won't. You sound certain. I am. Because you're as drawn to this as I am. Whatever this is. He was right, and we both knew it. The attraction had been there from the first moment, immediate and undeniable. But it was more than physical. It was recognition, connection, the meeting of two people who understood loss and loneliness and the desperate need to matter to someone. When he kissed me, it felt inevitable. His lips were firm, demanding, but there was tenderness underneath the hunger. I responded without thinking, hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and consuming. We barely made it inside. Clothes shed between kisses, hands exploring, learning. His bedroom was as carefully designed as the rest of the house. But I barely noticed. All I could focus on was him. The way he touched me like I was precious and necessary. The way he whispered my name like a prayer. Afterward, we lay tangled together. His arm around me, my head on his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady. Feel the rise and fall of his breathing. Stay tonight, he said into the darkness. Please. I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries. Kept this professional. Instead, I pressed closer and said, okay. His arm tightened around me, and I felt him relax in a way I suspected he rarely allowed himself. Outside, security patrolled and cameras watched. Inside, for this moment, we were just two people who'd found something unexpected and necessary in each other. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions about what this meant, what I was becoming by choosing to stay in his world. But tonight, held in the arms of a man who saw me completely and wanted me anyway, I let myself just be. The next 3 weeks became a careful dance between my old life and the new one I was building with Christopher. I still sang at Café Napoli on Tuesday nights, still paid my bills from my own account, still maintained the illusion of independence. But I spent most days at his office, surrounded by Maria's letters, searching for patterns in words written decades ago. Christopher gave me space to work but checked in regularly. Sometimes he'd bring coffee. Sometimes he'd sit and listen while I translated passages aloud. Sometimes he'd just stand in the doorway watching me with an intensity that made my skin warm. Whatever was building between us felt inevitable and terrifying in equal measure. I worked systematically, organizing the letters chronologically, cross-referencing names and events, building a timeline of Maria's concerns. She'd been worried about someone specific. That much was clear. References appeared in multiple letters, always carefully coded, never explicit enough to be obvious. On a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after our first dinner, I found it. The letter was tucked inside a journal from the year before Maria died. The pages yellowed and fragile. Her handwriting here was shakier. The effects of illness visible in every line, but the content was crystal clear. My dearest Julia, I translated quietly, reading through the first time. I write this knowing I may not have much time left. The doctors speak in gentle euphemisms, but I understand what they're saying. My concern now is for Christopher, for what he'll face after I'm gone. I continued reading, my hands beginning to shake as the implications became clear. Roberto trusts Sergio Moratoni like a brother, but I have never shared that confidence. There's something in his eyes when he looks at our family, at what we've built. Not admiration, resentment. I've tried to tell Roberto about my concerns, about the way Sergio asks questions that seem innocent, but probe too deeply into our defensive arrangements, our financial structures. But Roberto says I'm seeing shadows where there are none. I stopped, read the passage again to make sure I understood correctly. Sergio Moratoni, Franco's father, the man who'd been Roberto Vitale's right hand for decades. I discovered something last month that confirmed my fears. The letter continued. Sergio's mother was from Calabria, from a village with known connections to the 'Ndrangheta. He's hidden this connection, claimed his mother was from Sicily instead. I don't know if he's actively working with them, or simply maintaining ties as insurance, but either way, he's dangerous. If something happens to Roberto, if Christopher inherits the organization while still young, Sergio will be positioned to manipulate him, to slowly hand over everything to our enemies. The letter went on, detailing specific concerns, dates when Sergio had acted suspiciously, conversations Maria had overheard. It was meticulous, damning, and absolutely terrifying, because if she'd been right about the father, what did that mean about the son? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and texted Christopher. Need you in the library, now, found something important. He appeared within 2 minutes, clearly reading the urgency in my message. What is it? I handed him the letter, watched his face as he read through it. His expression didn't change, but I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his knuckles went white gripping the paper. Sergio Moratoni, he said finally, his voice flat and cold. Franco's father. He died 8 years ago. Heart attack. Or what was made to look like one. My father always said it was natural. Sudden but not unexpected given Sergio's health. Christopher set down the letter carefully. Franco took over his position. My father trusted him completely. And when I stepped up after Dad died, Franco was one of the first to pledge loyalty. And you believed him because his father had been loyal to yours. Because he grew up with me. We trained together. Learned the business together. He's the closest thing I have to a brother. Christopher's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Are you telling me he's been working with the 'Ndrangheta this entire time? I'm telling you what your mother believed about his father. Whether that extended to Franco, whether he's continued any relationship with Calabrian interests, that's something we need to find out. Christopher pulled out his phone, made a call. His Italian was too rapid for me to follow completely, but I caught enough. Surveillance, background checks, financial audits, discreet inquiries. He was thorough, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression that made my heart ache. Betrayal and anger and grief, all mixed together. I need you to keep going through the letters, he said. If my mother documented this much about Sergio, she might have written more about Franco. He would have been in his 20s then, already involved in the organization. Christopher, if Franco finds out you're investigating him, he won't. Not until I have proof. He came closer, cupped my face in his hands. Thank you for finding this, for treating it with the seriousness it deserves. I'm worried about you. Don't be. I've been handling threats since I was 17, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't just any threat. This was personal. I spent the next week going through every remaining letter with even more care, looking for any mention of Franco Moratoni. I found 3 references, all in letters from Maria's last months. Observations about the young man's behavior, questions about his loyalty, concerns that he seemed more interested in power structures than in actual family loyalty. He watches Christopher with calculation, Maria wrote in one letter. Not the way a friend watches a friend, but the way a predator watches prey. I pray I'm wrong. I pray the sickness has made me paranoid and suspicious. But I can't shake the feeling that Franco Moratoni will one day be the greatest threat my son faces. I showed Christopher each letter as I found them. Watched him process his mother's warnings, the implications of having been so close to someone who might have been plotting against him for years. The investigation he'd ordered came back on a Friday morning. I was in the library when he arrived, his expression grim. "They found it," he said, without preamble. Franco's been communicating with 'Ndrangheta contacts through encrypted channels. Financial records show money moving through shell companies with Calabrian connections, and surveillance caught him meeting with a known Cartel del Golfo lieutenant last week. I stood, went to him. "I'm sorry. So am I." He pulled me close, held tight. "My mother knew. She tried to warn my father, and he didn't listen. If he had, maybe none of this would have happened. You can't change the past, but I can control what happens next." He pulled back enough to look at me. "I'm going to confront him. Today, I need you to stay here, in this house, until it's done. Christopher, that's dangerous. If he knows you're on to him, he doesn't. Not yet. But I'm not going to let this continue. Not after everything we've found." His hand came up to my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I need to know you're safe. Please, do this for me." I wanted to argue, to insist I be there, but I saw the fear under his determination. Not fear for himself. Fear for me. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay, but you call me the second it's over." "I will, I promise." He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like he was memorizing the taste of me. When he pulled away, his eyes held something fierce and protective. "Whatever happens," he said, "whatever you learn about what I have to do today, remember that I'm doing it to protect what's mine. To protect you." "I know." He left, taking several men with him. I stood at the window watching the cars disappear down the drive, my stomach churning with anxiety. The house felt too quiet, too empty, despite the security personnel I knew were positioned everywhere. I went back to the library, to Maria's letters, seeking comfort in her words. Found one final letter I hadn't translated yet, dated just days before she died. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I'm gone. And Christopher faces the battles I feared. Tell him I loved him. Tell him to trust his instincts, to believe in his own judgment even when everyone around him says otherwise. Tell him that strength isn't about never showing weakness, but about choosing the right moment to be vulnerable with the right person. And tell him that love, real love, is worth any risk." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face, and prayed Christopher would come home safe so I could give him his mother's final message. Christopher returned 3 hours later. I heard the cars before I saw them, ran to the entrance hall just as he walked through the door. He looked exhausted, older somehow, but unharmed. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost collapsed. "It's done," he said, his voice rough. "Franco's in custody. Secure location. He won't be talking to anyone." What did he say? Everything. Once he realized we had proof, he stopped pretending. Christopher moved past me toward his office, and I followed. He admitted the 'Ndrangheta recruited him years ago, right after his father died. Said his father had maintained the connection as insurance, taught Franco to do the same. When my father died and I took over at 17, Franco saw an opportunity to take everything, to deliver it to the Calabrians in exchange for his own territory. A kingdom carved from my organization's corpse. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, downed it in 1 swallow. He said my mother would have been ashamed of me for being weak enough to trust him. The cruelty of that statement hit me physically. He's wrong. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become. Would she? Christopher turned to face me, and I saw the doubt in his eyes. I run an organization built on violence and intimidation. I've ordered people hurt, killed, destroyed. What's there to be proud of? You protect people. You maintain order in a world that would tear itself apart without someone strong enough to hold the line. I moved closer, and you showed mercy when you could have chosen revenge. Mercy. He laughed bitterly. Franco's going into permanent exile. Every resource he has, every connection, every dollar, it's all gone. He'll live the rest of his life knowing he lost everything. That's not mercy, Emily. That's torture. It's not execution. That matters, does it? Because right now I feel like putting a bullet in him would be kinder than what I'm doing. I understood then what was really eating at him. Not the betrayal itself, but the choice he'd made in response to it. The choice he'd made because of me. You spared him because you thought it's what I wanted, I said quietly. I spared him because you made me believe I could be different than my father, different than the men who came before me. He set down the glass. But maybe that's weakness. Maybe that's exactly what gets people killed in this world. Or maybe it's evolution. Maybe it's choosing to be better when you have the power to be worse. You don't understand what you're asking of me. The world I operate in doesn't reward mercy. It sees it as vulnerability, as an opening to exploit. Then change the world. You're powerful enough to do it. Am I? His laugh was harsh. Emily, the only reason the Ndrangheta and the cartel haven't already overrun my territory is because they know I'm willing to do whatever it takes. That I'll burn everything to ash before I surrender. The moment I show weakness, the moment I hesitate, they'll come for everything, including me. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. Christopher's expression shifted, the anger draining away to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. Yes, he said finally, including you. Franco made sure they know about you, about the letters, about everything you've helped me discover. You're a target now, Emily. A way to hurt me. The reality of that settled over me like ice water. I'd known intellectually that I was in danger, but hearing it stated so baldly made it real in a way I couldn't ignore. So what do? I asked. Hide here forever? Give up my life, my apartment, everything I built? I have a safe house in Montreal. Clean identity, enough money to start over, security that would keep you protected. You could be on a plane tonight, out of reach before anyone knew you were gone. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Your safety does. That's not an answer, Christopher. He moved toward me, stopping just close enough that I could feel the tension radiating from him. What I want is to keep you here, in my house, in my bed, in my life. What I want is to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. What I want is to build something with you that isn't based on danger and necessity. His voice dropped. But wanting something doesn't make it safe or smart. So you're asking me to choose. Leave and be safe, or stay and be with you. I'm giving you the option I should have given you weeks ago. A real choice, without pressure or manipulation. If you want to go, I'll make sure you're protected, provided for, safe, and I'll let you go completely. No strings, no obligations. I studied his face, seeing the pain this offer cost him. He meant it. He'd let me walk away, disappear, build a new life somewhere far from his complicated world. All I had to do was say yes. Can I ask you something first? I said. Anything. Do you love me? The question clearly caught him off guard. His carefully controlled expression cracked, showing raw emotion underneath. Yes, he said roughly. From the moment you sang that song, maybe before I even consciously knew it. Yes, I love you. Then here's my answer. I closed the distance between us. Took his face in my hands. I'm staying, not because I don't have other options, not because I'm trapped or afraid. I'm staying because I love you too. And I choose this. I choose you, Christopher. Whatever that means. Whatever it costs. Emily, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no guarantee of a happy ending. I don't need guarantees. I need honesty. I need you to include me in decisions that affect my life. I need you to stop trying to protect me from the truth of your world and trust me enough to be a real partner in it. A partner. Yes. Not a possession to be guarded. Not a weakness to be hidden away. A partner who understands what you do, who you are, and chooses to stand beside you anyway. Christopher searched my face, looking for doubt or fear or hesitation. I let him see everything. The love, the determination, the absolute certainty of my choice. If you stay, he said carefully, everything changes. You can't go back to your apartment, not safely. You'll need security everywhere you go. People will know you're connected to me, which makes you a target and an asset depending on who's looking. Your life will never be normal again. My life stopped being normal the night I sang in a cafe and a beautiful, complicated man recognized a song his mother taught him. I pulled him closer. I'm not looking for normal, Christopher. I'm looking for real. And this, what we have, this is more real than anything I've ever felt. He kissed me then. desperate and grateful and full of promises neither of us could be sure we'd keep. When we broke apart, I saw something new in his eyes. Not just love or desire, but respect, trust, partners, he said, like he was testing how the word felt. Partners. Then there's something you should know about Franco's punishment. He pulled back slightly, his expression becoming more serious. I chose exile instead of execution because you're right. I can choose to be different. But I also chose it because I wanted you to see that your influence matters, that you can help me build something better than what came before. That was selfish of me. Why selfish? Because I'm using you as an excuse to be the man I want to be instead of the man I'm expected to be. That's not fair to you. What if I want to be that excuse? What if I want to help you become someone your mother would be proud of? He smiled, small and genuine. Then I guess we're partners in revolution as well as everything else. She left you a letter, I said suddenly, remembering. Your mother. One last message. I found it this afternoon while you were gone. Christopher's expression shifted, vulnerability flooding his features. What did it say? That she loved you. That she wanted you to trust your instincts and believe in your own judgment. That strength isn't about never showing weakness, but about choosing the right moment to be vulnerable with the right person. I touched his face gently, and that love is worth any risk. His eyes shone with unshed tears. She always knew exactly what to say. She knew you'd face this, all of it, and she believed you'd make the right choices. I hope she's right. She is. Because you're choosing love over fear, partnership over isolation, evolution over tradition. That's brave, Christopher. That's strength. He held me close, and I felt the tension finally drain from his body. Outside, security patrolled and threats waited. Inside, we'd found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the risk of everything. Stay with me tonight, he said against my hair. Tonight and every night after. That's the deal. Best deal I've ever made. We stood there in his office, holding each other as evening turned to night. Two people who'd found something extraordinary in the most unlikely circumstances. The danger wasn't gone. The threats hadn't disappeared, but we'd face them together now, as partners, as equals, as two people who chose love even when safer options existed. And somehow, that made everything else bearable. 4 days passed in careful tension. I moved my essential belongings into Christopher's house, gave up the apartment lease I could barely afford anyway, and started learning the rhythms of life surrounded by security. Christopher worked to consolidate his position after Franco's removal, ensuring loyalty among his remaining people, reinforcing defensive positions. We were careful, cautious, waiting for the inevitable response from the Ndrangheta and their cartel partners. It came on a Tuesday night. I was in the bedroom when I heard the first gunshot. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it, that my paranoia had finally tipped into hallucination. Then the alarm system started screaming, and Christopher was suddenly in the doorway, his face hard with controlled fury. Panic room. Now. He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the hallway. What's happening? They're hitting the house. Coordinated assault. At least 20 men. He pressed his palm against a hidden panel, and a section of wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Down. All the way to the bottom. Door locks automatically from inside. More gunfire erupted, closer now. I heard shouting in Spanish and Italian, the distinctive crack of automatic weapons. Christopher's men were responding, but the assault was overwhelming. Come with me, I said, grabbing his shirt. I need to coordinate the defense. Emily, please. I can't do what I need to do if I'm worrying about you. He was right, and I hated it. I kissed him hard, fast, then started down the stairs. Behind me, the door slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, sealing me in darkness until motion sensor lights flickered on. The panic room was exactly what I expected. Reinforced walls, supplies for days, communication equipment, medical gear. A bunker designed to withstand anything short of a direct missile strike. I found the control panel, activated the security camera feeds, and watched the battle unfold above me. Christopher's property was under full assault. Men in dark tactical gear poured through breaches in the perimeter, met by Christopher's security forces. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. Bodies fell on both sides. It was brutal, efficient, and terrifying. I found Christopher on one of the interior cameras, coordinating from his office, phone pressed to his ear while gunfire rattled outside. He looked calm, focused, completely in control. Then I saw him flinch, his free hand going to his left shoulder. Blood spread across his white shirt. "No," I whispered, watching him continue giving orders even as he bled. "No, no, no." He was hit but still fighting, still leading. The realization of what that meant, how close he was to dying while I hid safe below, made something break inside me. I couldn't do this. Couldn't sit here watching while he bled out upstairs. The panic room door was designed to lock from inside for maximum security, but there was an emergency override, hidden behind a panel, meant for situations where someone needed to exit during an active threat. I found the manual, read through the instructions with shaking hands. It took 3 minutes to bypass the electronic lock, 3 minutes of listening to gunfire and watching Christopher grow paler on the security feed. The moment the lock disengaged, I grabbed the medical kit and ran up the stairs. The house was chaos. Smoke filled the hallways. Glass crunched under my feet. Bullet holes pocked the expensive walls. I heard fighting nearby. Men shouting, the crack of gunfire. I ignored it all, focused only on reaching Christopher. I found him in a corridor leading to his office, still on his phone, still giving orders. His left shoulder was soaked with blood, his face pale but determined. When he saw me, his expression shifted from shock to fury. "What the hell are you doing up here? Saving your stubborn life." I dropped to my knees beside him, pulling open the medical kit. "You've been shot." "I'm aware." "Emily, you need to get back to the panic room." "Shut up and let me work." I cut away his shirt, assessed the wound. Through and through, clean entrance and exit. But he was losing blood fast. I grabbed gauze and pressure bandages, working with hands that shook but held steady enough. Christopher made a sound between a laugh and a groan. "You're impossible. You're one to talk." I applied pressure to the wound and he hissed. "Sorry." "Don't be. Just hurry." I packed the wound as best I could, wrapped it tight enough to slow the bleeding. It wasn't pretty, but it would keep him alive until we could get proper medical attention. Around us, the gunfire was lessening, becoming more sporadic. Either Christopher's men were winning, or we were about to be overrun. "Tell me you're okay," I said, meeting his eyes. "I'm okay. Thanks to you." He cupped my face with his good hand. "You were supposed to stay safe." "I was. But then I watched you bleeding on camera and realized safe doesn't mean anything if you're not there." I helped him stand, taking some of his weight. "Can you walk?" "Yes, my office. We need to coordinate the cleanup." We made it the 20 feet to his office, Christopher leaning on me more than he wanted to admit. Inside, 3 of his men were positioned at the windows, weapons ready. One of them, a man named Luca, who I'd met a few days ago, rushed over to help. "Boss, you're hit." "I'm aware. Status?" "We've repelled the main assault. 12 hostiles down, 6 captured, the rest retreated. We lost 4 men, 3 more wounded." Luca's voice was professional, but I heard the anger underneath. They used Franco's intelligence, knew our security protocols, our blind spots. Franco's last betrayal. Christopher sat heavily in his chair. "Make sure our wounded get medical attention first. The hostiles we captured, I want them secured and alive. We need information." "Already done, boss." "Good." Christopher's eyes closed briefly. "Damage assessment?" "Significant. Perimeter sensors destroyed, 3 vehicles disabled, structural damage to the east wing. But the house is secure, and we've reinforced all entry points." I stood beside Christopher, my hand on his good shoulder, feeling his tension and pain radiate through both of us. He was running on adrenaline and will, but that wouldn't last forever. "You need a doctor," I said quietly. "Later. First, we secure everything." "Christopher." "Emily." He looked up at me, his eyes fierce. "I need you to trust me on this. If I show weakness now, if I let them see me as vulnerable, it undermines everything. 10 more minutes, Please. I understood what he was asking. In his world, leadership meant strength, even when you were falling apart. Showing vulnerability at the wrong moment could be fatal. 10 minutes, I agreed. Then you're getting proper medical attention even if I have to hold you down myself. The corner of his mouth lifted despite everything. Deal. Those 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Christopher gave orders, coordinated security improvements, spoke to his men with a strength that defied his injuries. I stayed beside him, silent support, ready to catch him if he fell. When his personal doctor finally arrived, an older man named Caruso who clearly had experience with these situations, Christopher let himself show the pain. Dr. Caruso examined the wound, gave Christopher something for the pain, and began proper treatment. You're lucky, Caruso said, working efficiently. Another inch to the right and this would have hit your subclavian artery. You'd have bled out in minutes. Good to know my luck is holding. Christopher's voice was strained but steady. I held his hand through the treatment, through the stitching and bandaging, through the moments when pain made his grip tighten until my bones ached. When it was finally done, Dr. Caruso packed up his supplies. Rest for at least a week. That shoulder needs time to heal properly. I'll check on you tomorrow. He looked at me. Make sure he actually rests. He's terrible at following medical advice. I'll chain him to the bed if necessary. Caruso smiled. I believe you would. After he left, after Luca reported that everything was secured and guards were in place, after all the immediate crisis had passed, Christopher finally let himself collapse. Not physically, not where his men could see, but emotionally. The weight of the attack, the losses, the close call, it all crashed down at once. I held him while he processed it. This strong, dangerous man who'd just fought off an army but couldn't fight off the human need to feel and grieve. We sat in his office surrounded by the evidence of violence, holding each other while the house settled into wary silence. They'll come again, he said finally. This was just the opening move. I know. You should have stayed in the panic room. You could have been killed. So could you. I made my choice, Christopher. I'm not going to hide while you bleed. I'm starting to understand that. He pulled back enough to look at me, and I saw something new in his expression. Not just love or desire, but genuine partnership. Recognition that I wasn't going to be protected or sheltered, but would stand beside him through whatever came. You're terrifying, you know that? Says the man who just fought off 20 armed men with a gunshot wound. That's different. That's my job. This is mine. Taking care of you. Making sure you survive long enough to build the life you deserve. He kissed me softly, carefully, his good arm pulling me close. Our life. The one we're building together. Yes, our life. Outside, dawn was beginning to break, painting the damaged grounds in shades of gray and gold. We'd survived the first real test, but more would come. The Ndrangheta and the cartel wouldn't stop with one failed assault. They'd regroup, plan, come at us from different angles, but we'd face it together, partners in every sense, stronger together than apart. And somehow, despite the violence and danger and uncertainty, that felt like enough. Christopher was a terrible patient. Dr. Caruso had ordered rest, but by the second day, Christopher was back at work, coordinating repairs and reinforcing security from his bedroom when I physically prevented him from going downstairs. By day 3, I'd given up trying to keep him still, and instead focused on making sure he didn't tear his stitches. That's when I realized something had shifted. His men started coming to me with questions, checking in about Christopher's condition, asking if now was a good time to brief him. Luca brought me security reports before taking them to Christopher, letting me filter what needed immediate attention versus what could wait. I'd become a gatekeeper without consciously deciding to be one. You're good at this, Christopher said one afternoon, watching me coordinate with Dr. Caruso about physical therapy, while simultaneously reviewing intelligence reports Luca had dropped off, managing information flow, prioritizing threats, keeping everyone organized. Years of freelance translation work taught